Hello. Cashing in on ingenuity. In the magical world of colonial America, they utilized not one, but two ingenious methods of issuing paper money. The first method was the direct issuance of notes, also known as bills of credit or treasury notes, which were essentially IOUs from the government, backed by future taxes. Verily, this method increased the money supply like a Fukushima leak. Since issuance, however, were localized, they were spared the harrowing burden of repaying nettlesome foreign lenders. Also, no interest accrued. Nada, zilch, zero. They were naught but mere credits, issued and duly expended upon sundry goods and services. With tax-backed fiat money, colonists could defer tax payments into the future and enjoy the immediate use of paper money for commercial transactions. The government, on the other hand, could access funds without imposing the full immediate burden of taxation. The second method was a stroke of genius. This involved the creation of a government loan office called a land bank. These land banks, despite their name, were not really banks at all. They didn't accept deposits or provide financial services like their modern counterparts. Loan office is a more accurate term, but let's face it, land banks sound so much more whimsical. Land banks generated a steady stream of revenue in the form of interest. These land banks issued paper money and lent it to citizens at low rates of interest. The operations of land bank varied among the colonies, but generally, they advanced currency to colonial residents at relatively low interest rates. They accepted an ambit of collateral, such as real estate, crops and agricultural produce, guarantees and sureties, property improvements, and assorted personal properties. Borrowers typically used the funds to improve their property and productive capacity. Defaults were rare, usually no more than 2% of the value of outstanding loans. Since land bank money was a property-backed currency, the growth of the population and subsequent demand for land largely insured against falling land values. Some land bank operations took a delightful detour from the mundane path of traditional collateral. Rather than demanding land deeds or personal assets as security, these loans hitched a ride on the coattails of future harvests. In this daring gambit, the humble yields of agriculture, crops and livestock, were transmuted into security as solid as gold. It was a stroke of brilliance, transforming the bounty of the earth into an unconventional form of assurance. Thus, with a wink and a nod to the fecundity of the land and the tireless toil of its farmers, the land bank furnished the sinews of commerce without exacting a pound of flesh, freeing them from the clutches of property forfeiture, and literally placing its fortunes on the promise of nature's bounty. Colonies that relied largely on land bank money enjoyed more stable currencies than those which depended more on fiat tax-backed money. The land bank method solved the recycling problem, as new money issued and lent to borrowers returned to the loan office on a regular payment schedule. This prevented the money supply from overinflating and kept the value of paper loan office bills stable in terms of English sterling. Most significantly, the interest paid on loans were funneled into the public coffers, funding government expenses, making taxation minimal and in many cases eliminated altogether. Call it representation without taxation, if you will. The middle colonies, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey, were particularly successful using this fundraising mechanism than the New England colonies and the Carolinas. Although counties and towns imposed their own taxes, these were generally light and rarely deemed objectionable. Like a culinary artist mixing recipes, most colonies employed both methods in varying proportions. Some colonies relied mostly on bills redeemed by earmarked taxes, while others leaned more heavily on land banknotes. Most used both in varying proportions, keeping life in the colonies as interesting as a game of Monopoly. However, not all colonies enjoyed stability. The New England colonies, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire, struggled with fluctuating paper currencies. They issued excessive amounts of bills of credit and loans. The more successful colonies refrained from issuing such surplus by channeling funds back through the cunning gloss of principal and interest payments on government-issued loans, a definite and deft dance with the devil of debt. It needs mentioning, however, that in addition to internal provincial taxes, the British government did impose implicit and explicit taxes on its American colonies. These consisted of duties on goods exported and customs duties paid on imports. Although these taxes remained modest during the first half of the 18th century, many of the duties were successfully evaded with a wink and a nudge. The revolt against external imposts and British government efforts to levy internal taxes in the colonies did not threaten a rupture with the mother country until, and especially in the aftermath, of the French and Indian War. Let's now focus, as a case study, on one of the more successful colonies, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's panacea. The Pennsylvania Plan, established in 1723, proved that it was possible for the government to issue new money in place of taxes without inflating prices. From 1723 until the French and Indian War in the 1750s, the provincial government collected no taxes at all. The land bank was the province's chief source of revenue, supplemented by import duties on liquor. During this period, Pennsylvania wholesale prices remained stable. Before the land bank rode in like a financial knight in shining armor, Pennsylvania had been losing both business and residents due to a lack of available currency. The land bank injected new money into the economy, allowing people to refinance their debts at lower interest rates. Franklin praised this system as the reason Pennsylvania has so greatly increased in inhabitants. In 1720, Pennsylvania discovered itself perched on a rather tenuous tightrope. The South Sea bubble, that rambunctious miscreant of financial folly, had burst its banks in England, causing a credit crunch that rippled out to the colonies like a particularly tenacious sneeze. Meanwhile, the once lucrative export of wheat to the West Indies wilted in the face of rising competition, and domestic commerce was as hamstrung as a hog-tied hog on account of silver coins being scarce as a snowflake in a desert. In their wisdom, or perhaps in a fit of legislative lunacy, the Pennsylvania legislature established a land bank in 1723. Benjamin Franklin, that polymathic paragon of 18th century know-how, stepped up to the plate in defense of the land bank's monetary machinations. With the astute observation that bills issued upon land are in effect coined land, Franklin supported the issuance of land bank notes, a paragon patron saint of paper currency. Periodic reissues of these wondrous notes in 1725, 1731, 1739, and 1746 replaced the worn, tattered, and counterfeit bills, while also granting the reloaned mortgages a new lease on life. Due to this remarkable financial alchemy, between 1720 and 1755, wholesale prices of commodities in Philadelphia remained as stable as a three-legged stool. However, the external value of Pennsylvania's sterling currency suffered a mere 21% depreciation during this period. This depreciation was due less to the quantity of currency in circulation than to the whims of trade relations, which fluctuated like the attentions of a particularly fickle suitor. Now, one cannot speak of colonial American history without mentioning the conflicts between proprietors, their appointed governors, and the settlers who footed the bill for government expenses. In Pennsylvania, the illustrious Penn family found itself in a perpetual tango with the Assembly, who were hell-bent on minimizing the taxes of their constituents. And so, between 1723 and 1755, the provincial government collected nary a property nor poll tax, subsisting instead on a diet of fees, fines, and the interest, which poured in like a river of gold from the land bank's operations. Pennsylvania's stunning growth was credited to its astute evasion of burdensome taxes, those leech-like impositions that drain the lifeblood of economic progress. With such a cunning financial scheme, it's no wonder Pennsylvania's growth was the talk of the colonies. Of course, this fiscal fiesta could not last forever, and the French and Indian War brought an end to the halcyon days of representation without taxation in colonial Pennsylvania. The colony's financial fancies took a turn as tax-backed bills were issued to support British military expeditions for the war. Relatively stable prices soon gave way to inflation, as the volume of tax-backed bills ballooned like a rather corpulent frog. Yet for a time, Pennsylvania thrived, basking in the glow of limited taxation and the curious alchemy of coined land, proving once again that history is, at times, as strange as fiction and just as entertaining.